Wooing China, Facebook is reportedly building a censorship tool that will allow it to re-enter the lucrative Chinese market. So is the social media giant giving in to China's crackdown on free internet, or is it all just about business? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Jane Dutton. Facebook has been trying to crack the Chinese market for years. That's because a country with over 700 million internet users could prove extremely lucrative. But the social media giant has been banned in China since 2009. The government has strict rules over online content and what users post to social media. But according to a New York Times article, Facebook is now secretly developing a software that will allow China's authorities to censor certain information on its site in exchange for being allowed to operate in the country. Human rights groups say this is giving in to censorship. Facebook hasn't confirmed or denied this story, but its chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, has been publicly courting Chinese leaders in recent years. The company released a statement saying, "We've not made any decision on our approach to China. Our focus right now is on helping Chinese businesses and developers expand to new markets outside China by using our ad platform." With China having the world's largest population of internet users, it's an incredibly important market for a company like Facebook, which wants to add China's 700+ million users to its existing 1.8 billion monthly users. But as we mentioned earlier, the Chinese government banned Facebook in 2009. It was an effort by the government to stop the flow of information about an ethnic unrest at the time. Facebook has restricted content in other countries before, including Pakistan, Russia and Turkey. It blocked around 55,000 pieces of content in about 20 countries last year. Well, let's now bring in our guests. Joining us from Shanghai, Zenon Capron, CEO of Capron Asia. It's a market research and consulting firm that analyzes technology trends in China. From Beijing, Einar Tangen, political and economic affairs commentator. And in Berlin, Stephanie Hanke, executive director and co-founder of the Tactical Technology Collective. A very warm welcome to all of you. Let me start off with you, Stephanie Hanke. What do you think Facebook is trying to do here? What are they up to at the moment?
I think you have to look at this in the broader context of Facebook wanting to move into a market that they call the next billion, meaning different countries in the world where there's a large market and where they have actually wanted to get into for some time. Earlier this year, they started with a project called Facebook Zero in India that was actually pushed back by the Indian government, and where they wanted to kind of control the gateway, let's say, to the internet through Facebook, through giving actually free access to the internet, which didn't work out. And I think now in China, this is an important market for them. Also because the social media market in China is already populated with Chinese companies. And I think you have to look at the context there in which they're working and the cost of doing business in an environment like China. And I think that's probably how they're seeing it.
Zenon Capron, can they get in? Talk us through the technology that has been raised to ease their entry into China.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of different issues here. I mean, the first issue is the censorship. I mean, that's what's kept Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, a lot of foreign tech companies out of China. So that's the first hurdle to get through. And that's kind of what brought up this topic with the news challenges that Facebook is facing, and then this supposed tool that's to help them to censor content in China. The second challenge is, can they even be successful in this market? I mean, we saw earlier this year, Uber kind of wave the white flag and give up and sell out to Didi here in China, to one of the local competitors. So there's a lot of tech companies that have come into China that haven't faced the censorship challenges and still struggled to make a business and to make a go of it here.
Einar Tangen, what's the view from where you are?
Well, the view here is that increasingly around the world, you're seeing what we call the sovereign internet. I think that was something Xi Jinping has talked about for the last 2 years at a number of conferences around China. I think this is going to continue. And what you see here is a kind of market adaptation to it. The issue isn't going to be so much is this right or wrong. I just don't think that there's any way of avoiding it.
All right, no way of avoiding it. Let's talk about the tools first to see if it is feasible for Facebook to enter this market, Zen. And how does this censorship tool work and how will it be applied? Who controls it?
Well, Facebook has a number of different options. I mean, it seems to be the difference of what they're looking at this time is the ability to censor the posts even before they make it onto the timeline. So as you mentioned before, around the world in various countries, they have the ability to censor posts once they're on the timeline, but this would preempt that. And that technology is very common here in China. Anybody who's on a social media platform domestically knows that there is some censorship that happens and critical posts are removed very quickly or not even allowed at all. So presumably this technology would work in that way. There has been some talk that it would be outsourced to a local Chinese company, and that might be the partnership that would help Facebook enter the market.
Einar, is that what's going to happen? Does there need to be, if Facebook is successful, a local partner in order for Facebook to hand over the sensitive censorship issues?
Well, it's a lot of it's how you structure the relationship. I don't think just having a local partner is going to solve a number of the issues that they have. For instance, as was said by other guests, a lot of companies have come into China thinking that it was going to be a blockbuster for them, only to leave shortly afterwards with not achieving their objectives. Uber is one of them. In this particular case, I think they'd be far better off with some sort of licensing deal that's going on. It gives them separation. It's kind of like the old model where you had the CBS, NBC, and then you had the affiliates in each one of the cities that control their own area. There was a line between them. In this particular case, it's not only China that we're talking about. There are other nations around the world who will seize on this, and quite frankly, it's being called for in the United States in terms of the, quote, fake news, preventing that from getting onto the timeline or preventing people from making money for it. It's come up as a real issue, especially given Donald Trump's election.
All right, you've raised quite a few points there, but I want to pick on a little bit further the challenges to doing business in China when it comes to these sort of tech companies, these social media platforms, and you also mentioned Uber. What makes it so hard? Is it the regulations that's in place, compounded with censorship and possibly fear of outside interference?
There are a number of nexus points. We were talking about the government. They do fear this kind of idea that the internet will be used as a fifth column to stir unrest or to create a perception that China is on the boiling point. Already within the international news, they feel very strongly that the true China is not represented. So they do not trust an internet program where they can't even vet who's coming or who's reporting on it. So that's one area. The second area that we're talking about is how to do business in China. Yes, it's very difficult. This is a hyper-competitive economy. You already have Weixin and WeChat. They will not be welcoming. As you saw with Kuaididi, they were not welcoming. They formed ranks together and eventually overcame Uber. So you have to be very, very careful about how you're doing business in China and make sure you understand that you're bringing something that China wants, not thinking that you're just going to enter and compete.
Stephanie, how does Facebook deal with the competition raised by Einar there? I mean, will those remaining in China lobby against Facebook? Will they make it difficult, and can they?
It's hard to say. I mean, they obviously have a large share of the market right now that they don't have to compete over. But I think what's interesting is to look at the trends there as well. You have Jack Ma just in the last few weeks coming out, the founder of Alibaba, talking about the necessity of the government to use big data around things like fighting crime and things like predictive policing. You've also got more recently the what's generally known as social scoring, sort of credit scoring and social scoring of citizens in different kinds of projects and pilots there that are linked to the government. So that's the idea of looking at people's, for example, Facebook feeds in this case, or whatever other kind of social media software they're using, and trying to give them a scoring analysis that might do things like affect their credit scoring. So that environment that Facebook's moving into is quite complex in terms of what are the norms within the society, but also the way in which people are getting used to technology being used on the personal data that they're giving away. So in this sense, Facebook might find itself in quite a different environment, not just because of the competition.
Zenon, I think Stephanie raised a very good point there. Possibly Facebook users, social media users have no idea how information is willingly given to platforms like Facebook and advertisers every time we log on, and how this could be manipulated for advertisers, for governments possibly.
I think so, but at the same time, the Chinese users have gotten used to the idea that a lot of these technology companies are using their data for products and services. I mean, if you look at the way, Anar mentioned the WeChat platform. I mean, on WeChat now you can book a taxi, you can buy movie tickets, you can chat with friends, you can send money. The amount of functionality that's happening on that platform allows Tencent to collect an incredible amount of data about the users. We did a study last year and we asked 1,000 Chinese millennials how they felt about their privacy and their privacy needs. And so one of the questions we asked was Baidu using their search habits to predict or to provide them with a financial product. So basically using your search history to create a financial product for you. And we found that about 45% of the people were comfortable with that. So people using their data to create something that's better for them, whether that be a financial return or more convenience in their life. So I think the combination of things will make it slightly easier for Facebook because because people are used to sharing some of that data willingly or unwillingly. I think the real challenge is still the censorship and the government's approach to that. That will be the big challenge for Facebook coming into the market.
Einar, do you think China is ready for Facebook? And I'm talking about the government as well. And why would the government entertain Facebook coming in?
Well, I mean, they don't need it. It would be an extra competitor in the market. There's nothing that Facebook is bringing to China that isn't already here. In fact, I would say Tencent is far way ahead of Facebook because of the other matters that they're able to bring into it, this ability to pay for taxis, to buy things, order things, all of these things. So I'm not certain that if they had let Facebook in, that it would necessarily make a big impact on the market. I think the novelty would be there. But as I said before, you be very careful before entering China if you're just coming here to compete as opposed to bring something that the government and the people here really want.
Isn't there a concern, Stephanie, that China could use Facebook to manipulate the sort of information that people are getting? If this tool, this highly secretive tool, is indeed successful, you could control what they're getting, what they're not getting, what people think they're putting on their Facebook page, but actually it's only shown to you.
Yeah, I think it's a broader question. I mean, whatever happens in China, whether or not Facebook implements such a technique, I think it's a broader question that is happening right now globally, which is, what is the role of an organization like Facebook in our consumption of news? Are they neutral? Are they just a platform or just a vehicle through which we receive these things, or should they and do they have a say in this? And I think we're seeing that now in many different ways. We're seeing that obviously recently with the news in the US around fake news around the elections. But we've also seen other examples where there was a project by the Wall Street Journal showing something called Blue Feed, Red Feed that shows how different types of profiles of consumers using Facebook might receive different kinds of news depending on how they've politically aligned themselves with the liberal or conservative agenda. And so there's already a kind of filtering happening through the algorithms in Facebook. And I think we have to ask ourselves, is it really that different? Are we already, in many parts of the world, getting a very restricted view on the news, and that's already controlled? And we have a question there in the context of China. If this is really a third party deciding what gets filtered and what doesn't, how is that different from an algorithm that may also decide the same kinds of things?
Zenon, will Facebook be posing itself as a tech giant or rather as a media company? And case in point made by Stephanie with the damages caused by fake news.
Yeah, and I think that's a bigger challenge for Facebook globally is what they want to be in the future. I mean, certainly I think the social element of that is its primary focus and its primary purpose as kind of an internet platform. And we've seen the news become much more important on Facebook over the past couple of years. But the question is kind of what role does it want to play, and that role is not different than any other company. You know, the questions that Alibaba has to ask of itself or Tencent has to ask of itself, it just becomes even more complex here in China.
And Einar, how important is it for China to be seen not to be left behind in this world?
Well, it's not only a question of perception. They're very anxious to get on with it. I mean, every nation is out there talking about the road to the future is paved with technology and innovation. The question is, how do you get that? When it started off, it was WWW, World Wide Web. Now it's become internet sovereignty. The idea of, as we've been discussing, that you are private or that the information you generate will not be used, I think is pretty much dead, and people will get used to that, the kind of new internet normal. In terms of where it goes from here, I don't know. I don't think that you're going to see a big reaction to Facebook entering the market. I think the main issue for the Chinese government, if they wanted to use something like this as a new technology, is really as a media company, with 44% of Americans getting their news from Facebook. This would be a direct line to a lot of people that maybe the Chinese government or its bodies would want to use.
Okay, Einar, you say that they would like to see it as a media company. Do you think they would then allow the live feed that Facebook has to offer? Because that tells a different story, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, that's, I don't think that you're going to, at best, I think it would be delayed. In essence, what would happen is anything added to the timeline would go through basically an artificial intelligence. Any kind of feed that was going through would also be subject to that, so there'd be a slight delay. And only those things that were not covered or on the naughty list would get through. But as I said, this is not just about China. I can think of many countries around the world who are doing this deliberately. And then there are those like the United States and other countries who are doing this clandestinely. I mean, as we've seen from Snowden, there's been a tremendous amount of infiltration of our personal data and what it's used for, what it is used for. So, as I said, the new normal is the internet is not private.
It's not private, and I'm wondering, Stephanie, if people care, if internet users or Facebook users care that Facebook might be going into China at any stage soon and is using a censorship tool to get in there.
I think in this sense, perhaps not so much anymore. I don't think people see the difference. For example, there's a lot of controversy earlier this year on whether Facebook itself is playing too heavy a role in censorship generally, not just in places like China. There was a scandal over the fact that they blocked this iconic image of the Vietnam War. A Norwegian newspaper editor challenged Zuckerberg directly to come out with a statement on that because they're using automated systems to censor things which perhaps shouldn't be. Because it's been not done by, for example, a group of editors or a group of people who are intervening. So I don't see it that different. I think people are used to these kinds of questions coming up and broader questions about, is Facebook kind of dodging the bullet really by continuously insisting that they're just a platform and they're just a technology vehicle? And I think that increasingly people are aware in many different environments as well of the fact that they may be getting manipulated information. Is, you know, as the others here have said, it's not just China. There have been many examples recently in the Philippines and Indonesia and lots of different places where news is manipulated around political issues, around elections and those kinds of things. And I think users are getting more savvy and more aware of that and want to know more about it.
Zenon, this is probably what it's all about, isn't it? About manipulating information. And as Stephanie was saying, what side are you on or how you position yourself? And I guess there are dangers in that and benefits too.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think what Anar said was very apt. You know, the age of privacy is pretty much over on the internet. And the best we can hope for in a lot of cases is awareness that it's happening. You know, I think the fake news on Facebook, not many people knew that that was actually happening until it was reported on. So I think the best we can hope for in the future is that we know that it's happening and you can use your own judgment to make call as to what you believe or what you don't believe.
Einar, the country's, China's military newspaper, called the internet the most important front in the ideological battle against Western anti-China forces. Is that how it's seen, and is that the case?
I think it's an extreme position within the government. I mean, there's a new nationalism within China, and this kind of jingoistic behavior is the kind of thing that fills coffers. You know, everyone wants a budget, and I think this is one of the ways that you get it. No different from the NSA saying, oh, you know, we have to revamp the entire security apparatus because somehow we let some guy named Snowden get access, and a number of others get access to our means and methods. So a lot of this is playing out in terms of real politic, real money, people going after what they seem. But in reality, China has a very fine line to play. They have so far garnered a lot of attention because of the example that they have set in the world through their economic progress. A lot of that progress depends on having accurate, real-time information about the newest and best things in order to drive their own innovation. At some point, they're going to have to get comfortable with the fact that people say bad things about them, but sticks and stones do not break your bones. So I hopefully, at some point, the confidence level increases to the point where they don't feel the need to restrict everything.
Stephanie, is it better to be part of the conversation than not part of it at all?
Yeah, well, I guess one would always say yes. I mean, I think just going back also to the question about users, I think what we see now is different kinds of interventions like user plugins, something you can plug into your browser to see if to try and detect or help you detect if the news you're looking at is fake or not. I'm sure you can imagine that the same may happen to see whether or not you're being restricted from or censored from certain content. And I think the question that raises is whose responsibility is that? I think that when you think about a user plugin to help you understand when the news is fake or not, this only appeals to a certain kind of person, and has been argued maybe the kind of person who would install that doesn't need that kind of assistance anyway. He's already on the lookout for it, let's say, already aware. And it does push the responsibility away from the companies towards the user, and is that the right thing? Here in Germany, you have Merkel kind of arguing that maybe it would be a good idea for social media companies to be transparent about how they rank news. So transparency is also another question here. Is it okay for Facebook to work however it works with fake news or censorship or anything else, as long as we're aware of it and aware of the steps in between our access to that information and what's happened to it in the process, or how it appears to us as priority news or real news?
And Zanan, if we go back to the business plan here, if you look at how Facebook has dominated the social media platform for so long, I mean, its future relies on continued growth, more users, regardless of from where they come.
Certainly, and I think the countries that are left for Facebook are the most difficult countries. I mean, it just happens that China and India are two of them, and that represents a huge swath of the population, of the global population. But it's two of the most challenging markets, certainly globally, and so Facebook really has its work cut out for it in China. I think, as we discussed before, it's not just the censorship that's going to be the challenge. I mean, if you look at a lot of the companies that have come through China and not done particularly well, eBay, PayPal, Microsoft, when it initially came here, Uber, there's any number of companies that didn't have the issues of censorship, but still failed to execute properly in China. So, although there are some government restrictions in place around this particular business model that Facebook is looking at, it's going to be certainly a challenging market for not just that reason, but just because it's a different market with different consumers with different needs than they've seen anywhere else.
And as you say, different challenges, Einar. I mean, whatever way you look at this, we certainly are entering into a new era, a new period, aren't we?
Yes, we are. The next phase of this is this artificial intelligence. Up to this point, from the beginning, it was always about exchanging information. Then it became about distribution. This is where we have the Amazons and Alibabas. Now we're switching into a new phase where artificial intelligence running 24/7 could have a tremendous impact on the way that we live and exchange information, how we interact and how we perceive the world. And I think this is very important. Within that context, it's very scary to start thinking that in addition to government actors, we're going to have large non-government actors like Facebook with the ability and the agenda to try to change what we see.
Let's leave it. Looking forward there. Those final words, Einar Tangen, Zenon Capron and Stephanie Hankey. Thank you very much for talking to us on Inside Story. And thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, please go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. Mine is @Jane Dutton. Goodbye and thanks for watching.